At 7:30. Let me see, Andrew, do you wanna do, for people who are on Zoom, do you wanna do the regular spiel?
Sure can. Evening, Katrina. So thank you everyone for joining us on the Cpdc hearing of Monday, December 12th, 2022, last meeting of 2022. This meeting is conducted in person and through Zoom meeting remotely, and it is also being broadcasted on RCTV through the local channels as well. I'm Andrew McNichol, the Community Planning and Community Development Director, and with me on CPDC is Tony DeRezzo, John Weston, Heather Klisch, Katrina Meyer, and Pam Adrian, all in person tonight. We do ask if you're in person that you sign in the corner if you haven't already, and if you're on Zoom, please stay muted until public comment is acknowledged. The board will follow their standard procedure of the applicant presenting to the board will do comment and question between themselves and then open to public comment. When public comment is open, please use the raise hand feature under reactions or just simply raise your hand and I can note such to the chair. Outside of that, I think that's it for me, Heather.
Okay, that's terrific. So I think our first item of business is a sign permit application for 605 Main Street, Lovestruck.
And the awning mechanic is here. I have the rendering that I can also show on screen. Sorry, signing in.
Okay, we have the project proponent on Zoom.
Just signing in,
Signing in,
sorry.
okay.
Colin?
Yeah.
If you don't mind, if you want to summarize the proposal, if you can.
Your item for the Lovestruck sign is the first item.
Right, it's just a recover of an existing frame that's been there for a long, long time. And all we are planning to do is to replace the material with the exact same material of the other awnings that abut it and add a new signage. And you can see it's that Lovestruck signage on there. And that's what they proposed. And this is something that, we usually goes right through, but I don't know, what your comments are on it.
Okay, we'll find out.
Okay.
Any comments or questions from CPDC?
My question is, what's the nature of the business?
I think they're gonna sell apparel.
Ah, okay.
She has a place across the street that sells little kids' clothing.
This is the one that's it's already open.
Which one?
Lovestruck.
Yeah.
This is owned by the woman who owns Goodhart.
Yes.
So I saw something about it being the next
Right.
age up.
Older children.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's for older kids. I don't know exactly what the ages are or anything like that.
Good to know. Thank you.
There you go.
Question, are you responsible for the actual sign or just the awning?
We will put the lettering on the awning.
Okay. When you say it's 14 inches high, does that include the lightning bolt?
Yes.
Or just the letters? Okay,
The lightning bolt, so the letters are actually smaller than that.
all right. I have no further questions.
And the color is intended to be the same as the other awning?
Exactly the
Okay.
same material, same color. The only change in that is the logo and the graphics.
Beautiful.
That was my question also, is the rendering has the coloring looking a little bit different, but the color is intended to be the
I
same?
mean, she wanted originally to have different colors. I said, stay with the white, you're all set.
Okay. Other questions?
None for me.
All right, that just opened up a can of worms. So the lettering is white. The awning in the picture was maroon, the other ones are red.
No, they're all burgundy.
All burgundy, okay.
Terrible camera. Or actually, one's sort of faded a little in there for one.
Okay, then I'm good.
Okay, so we have the certificate of appropriateness with us.
I thought that I saw a different business name in
There
the,
was earlier today, I corrected that, thank you.
Madam Chair, did you want to ask for public comment?
I do want to ask for public comment, thank you. Any public comment from the room or the Zoom? Okay, if we're ready, I think we can take a motion to approve unless folks want another minute to look at the certificate.
all right, well, in that case, I'd like to make a motion to approve the certificate of appropriateness for the 605 Main Street Love Struck sign permit.
Okay, second. Thank you, all in favor? All right, that's approved unanimously, thank you very much.
And that's how easy it is.
See, that one was easy. That's how,
doing, that's advice.
that's how easy it can be. We should put it that way. Okay, so the next item up is another sign permit application for 721 Pearl Street, the Bear Meadow Conservation
And
Land.
it's misspelled in the agenda.
It is misspelled, it's bear, is it?
Sorry.
Yep, no,
I'm
you're
gonna
good.
beat on
Call
that
me up
drum.
for it, it'll make me better in the future. So we do have Chuck Taroni from Conservation here with us as well, similar in nature to the Matera Cabin sign approved a few months back at this point now, but Chuck is here to kind of summarize the needs and the sign itself.
I see there was a courtesy notice of public meeting
There
for
was.
this. Should we read that?
You are not obligated to, but if you'd like to, you can. We did not get any public comment.
Okay,
Okay, well, all right,
it's pretty straightforward.
it's pretty straightforward, okay.
Sure, yeah. I don't know if you're gonna read that notice or not. If not, I'll just let you know that we're upgrading the sign at the Bear Meadow and Matera Cabin Conservation Area, and we did one sign last year on Main Street, and this year we have the money to finally put a nice sign at the Pearl Street parking lot. So that parking lot is underutilized, and we thought the sign would identify this parking lot for people that like to use the meadow and that would like to use the community garden. So from this parking lot, you can walk straight over to the Matera Cabin or the community garden if that lot is filled. And for that reason, we wanted to get a sign and highlight this area. The sign is exactly like the sign at the entrance to Matera Cabin with the font and all, but it is unlike the town signs because we couldn't afford the gold leaf, and for that reason it does look a little different. Things stand out differently in our sign than they do at the DPW or the town hall, but I think that extra money wasn't appropriate for the Conservation Commission to spend on signs. So anyways, and it also doesn't have granite bounds. It's a steel post that'll hold this up. So if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
I have one. Do you have a copy of the Matera Cabin sign so that we may reference it?
I have a copy, but I don't have a way to put it on the screen.
It was in our
Oh, there we go,
packet.
thanks.
There we go, yeah.
Different?
It's in the packet.
I didn't print it out. Okay, you have right justified Matera Cabin here, and then center aligned the next two lines, and on the Bear Meadow, you've now left aligned that. What's the reason for doing it differently?
So, as I understand it, the sign is a lot smaller, and this is how it fit best in that in that sizing of the sign. So Matera, on the other sign, obviously more letters, and it's on top and it's the first word, and then cabin would be underneath it, less letters. So, how
It's
could
random.
I don't know how we could get it to look like Matera cabin, because you only have Bear to work with, and that could either be where it is or to the right. It doesn't work on the right.
Anybody else with
I
comments?
could see that. Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure why it wouldn't work on the right. I mean, it's fine, right? You left it justify or right justify, it's the same height one way or the other. But
Unless we put the town's logo there, I guess in my mind, you'd have to fill that spot in that's on the right, because we read from left to right.
So what you're
So
saying is
there
that it
would
would
be
be
a blank
indented
spot.
and there'd be a
Yeah,
blank
yeah,
spot
yeah.
where,
Yeah.
okay.
I'm the one that brought up the issue with the fonts and everything before, and right, that drives me crazy. But whatever, we can be inconsistent. That's not bad.
So also the fonts, I know that came up a couple of times. So we compared our fonts with the fonts at the DBW and the town hall, and there are two different fonts there. It is only from my eyes, and we had someone else look at it, their eyes also, it only looked like it was the gold leaf that made it different, because there are two fonts with the town sign also.
Right, but I don't want to get into it. Right, these fonts are not the same as the town. The ones, and there are two different fonts on the town signs, right? This particular font used for Bear Meadow and for Matera Cabin are a different font than the ones that the town uses in those signs.
Right.
At some point, come on, right? It's not that big of a town. We don't have that many signs. Let's pick something and go with it. We don't have to. If people don't want to, that's fine. My real question on this is, it says that the finished sign will be red with no black border. It's shown with a black border. The Matera Cabin has one with a black border. I happen to notice that the one out front here, the sign has a black border. What's the rationale for no black border? And is that the sign, or is that there's no black border on the sign, but the mounting creates the black border?
Yeah, I'll have to look into that. I'm seeing the sign. This is the sign we approved. I expected to come in with a black border, even if the apparatus that mounts it kind of bookends the edges, which are in black border. So yeah, I don't see that as a problem. The other difference about this sign is this is not a carved sign. This is a painted sign also. So the Bear Meadow sign is carved in, all that lettering.
And I'm sorry, was the Matera Cabin one a carved
Yes,
sign?
carved also. Mm-hmm.
So I did confirm that the black border would be present, because I noted that as well. Why would
Okay.
we do that? So we did get the mechanic to confirm that the black border would be included, both around the lettering and around the sign.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's an errant comment there on the. All right.
My question is something that I'm a little bit embarrassed I didn't think about last time when we were talking about the Matera Cabin sign. I mean, these basically look consistent, at least for conservation areas. It's kind of a question and a comment where there's nothing on the sign that identifies it as a town conservation area. And I think there is value to somewhere, if not on the sign, and we already did one, and we don't want to be too different all over the place, somewhere near the trailhead to identify this as town owned and managed. I think there's a benefit to the town for people recognizing that this is a town service, it's not a land trust. And I'm wondering if that elsewhere in the trailhead or at a kiosk or anything, if there's a clear identification that this is a town conservation area.
I like that, but I can't figure out how it would fit on the sign.
I can't
Which
either.
doesn't mean I don't want to put it on the sign, I just don't know how it would lay out, because so much is changing. The town of Reading, Reading's Bear Meadow Conservation Area. Reading, I don't know what phrasing we would use there, but I understand what you're saying.
Well, if I might offer a suggestion, you already said it. Could we just, if it's a painted sign, just paint the town logo on the sign?
Add the logo,
Add the logo in that empty spot around Bear.
and then put Bear on the other side, onto the far right-hand side, and put the logo on the left-hand side.
I'd leave the logo on the right-hand side, but I'll let the graphic designers determine whether to move the bear left or right. But
All right,
just
so
the
we can
logo.
add the logo to that sign.
I was thinking the same thing, instead of paint a decal, right, you could, if we have them, right, which I would hope that we do, or think that we do, right, like probably one on both signs, right?
But could you affix a seal?
Yeah,
Yeah.
fix the seal, yeah, in that area to the right of trailhead and parking, it doesn't need to be big, it just needs to sort of let people know that it's the town seal.
Yeah, it
And
kind
you
of
could-
doesn't even need to be decipherable,
Right,
really, it
right.
just, it looks like the town
Yeah.
symbol that you see. And I think I heard what you said, that, we can't afford the gold leaf and the fancy thing that's on the town hall, but if we have a seal that could just be affixed to it, that would solve the problem.
And maybe, I'm looking at the Matera Cabin one, you could put it in the same location, the bottom right there.
Bottom right next to, I guess I'm seeing
At the end of-
1481 Main Street,
Yeah.
right at the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a good idea.
Yeah, that should be easy. The sign company should be able to come up with a logo or our town seal.
yeah.
Okay,
I'll
accept
ask a
that
question.
change, that's fine.
You said it's attached with a steel pole. Is there one steel pole, two steel poles?
I think it's it's two posts on either, from my understanding, it's two posts on either side that frame out the edges, and
Okay,
and of course it says Bear Meadow on both sides, so people can see it going in both directions.
well, from the picture, it looks like they can see it from one direction, the other direction's a little
Yeah.
hidden.
I hope to take down some of those shrubs. They're mostly invasives.
Okay,
Yeah, that's Japanese knotweed right there. Whole stand of it. So we could take that down sometime next summer.
So the
Okay.
sign will be perpendicular to the road.
Yes.
And if it's on the property instead of the right of way, it should be far back enough so that it doesn't create a,
We'll coordinate with engineering.
what?
We'll coordinate on sight lines with
Yeah,
engineering
please do.
when they go at least.
Yeah, we work with Ryan Percival on the other sign and Peter Reinhardt. So I expect both of those people will come out and help us place this sign also.
Other questions or comments?
Nope.
And any questions or comments from attendees? Okay. Certificate of appropriate. No.
There is actually none
is none.
for this case, so have your notes, I've started all your comments.
Because it's a town sign.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
okay, so yeah, the one comment to take away is to somehow put the logo or the seal on there.
Yeah, we'll grab some seals for both the sign we've already installed and this one here and take care of that.
Yeah.
That was a good comment, so accept that.
I do, right, every time I drive by the not every time, but like it definitely pops out, you notice it more, it like stands out and you like think about the place.
Yeah, it's
And
true.
Right, I assume the same will happen with this,
Mhm.
just calling it out
Yeah.
will be good.
Yeah, that sign does look really nice and
Yeah.
it's very, it looks welcoming.
Yeah.
Yeah. It looks like, I would know where to turn now.
Yes.
And I'm assuming it's not lit at all?
No, it doesn't have lights. Yeah, all that kind of activity up at Matera Cabin's a little tough to do. Lights, there's a little bit of vandalism going on up there, so we're generally worried. Our next step is to try to get Wi-Fi to get some more surveillance up there, and then we can build on top of that. But lights would be nice.
I was thinking the opposite, but okay.
I know in the,
Lights first, then internet.
I know up in Andover conservation areas, they put those bear cams up in the trees so that they can surveil by motion detector if someone's in there.
I was actually thinking that the light might not be needed because you might not want folks finding it after dark, but I'd light on the sign.
Yeah.
Well, that's also a good point. I mean, it's dawn to dusk use, so then lights would go off just as it was getting dark.
Yeah. So, I don't know, things to consider. All right, well, so we don't need to do a
No
vote or
votes.
anything,
No
right?
votes.
All right.
Thank you, though.
Thank you.
Good,
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, Chuck.
Okay,
Yep, appreciate it. Bye now.
well, apparently still at 7:30, we have the continued public hearing for the 40R plan review at 25 Haven Street.
Yes, Josh Latham is on the Zoom call, last minute update that he is gonna provide and ask.
Really?
Good evening, Josh Latham on behalf of the applicant. I apologize, I actually just got a call from my client that we need to request a continuance. I don't really have any more details on it, but I don't want to waste your time if I don't really have anything specific that I can say otherwise. So I'm asking if we could continue this hearing until the next available public hearing.
Okay, I think we can do that. I think we also need to be mindful of the timing on this one, right? So
Yeah.
we need something in writing, and we also need to ideally have it continued so that we aren't forced into like a midnight vote on it, right?
Yes, and my recall is we last continued a few days, the vote or the issuance of a decision a few days after your January hearing, but we'll get it in with Josh in writing tomorrow by email or he can come in.
Okay,
And so if I can say one thing, it's not deliberation or talking, but more logistical. I would hope that through the process that you're setting up, that, right, there are questions about historical commission review and comment back to us, and hopefully in this time frame that whatever is needed to get that review and comment as a group
yes.
could be done so that we don't then stumble, that doesn't create another stumbling block.
I agree, and again, this is not deliberation, but just kind of with what's been submitted to the public record, it'd be expeditious to have that all squared away by the time it
It
comes
comes
back.
back to us, yes.
Yes,
May I
Mr.
just
Burns.
ask, can you clarify that, because I'm not sure I followed what that issue was.
Well,
Right, it came, right, in our guidelines, it says that buildings like this have to be reviewed by historical commission, and we have comments, but we don't have anything by the historical commission itself. And so I don't want to cause delay if time is an issue here. So let's make sure that happens in this before we get through.
and we're not deliberating on that right now because the proponents of the project aren't here to be part of the deliberation. But Mr. Burns, you submitted something that kind of lays out some questions, and so the proponent should take a look at that and get it squared away.
Thank you.
What's the date for the next meeting?
Our next meeting is January 9th, 2023.
Okay.
I'd say 8 o'clock for this one if we can.
I'd like to make a motion to continue the public hearing for the 40R plan review for 25 Haven Street to January 9th, 2023 at 8 p.m.
Second.
Alrighty, all in favor? Okay, that motion carries and we'll see you January 9th at 8:30.
Thank you for your time. Happy holidays.
you.
Alright, thank you.
Thank you for your kind consideration of pushing it off.
Oh wait,
Good night.
was that, and so I'm sorry, I know we just voted, we said we'll continue to that hearing, but we still, in writing will be, the decision will come a few days after that.
Yes, so we have that.
Okay,
Yes, yeah.
But it's still set for January,
Yes, yeah.
a couple days after.
Thanks, Josh. We'll follow up tomorrow.
Thank you. Good night.
okay, so we're now early, and our next topic doesn't come up till 8:15, so we should probably look at some minutes, or do you wanna give us an update in the meantime?
Yeah.
Why don't we look at some minutes for, why don't we look at, in our packet, are the August 8th minutes.
Andrew, are you ready to accept comments on the August 8th minutes?
1 second away. I am ready.
Page 1, under the sign permit, third paragraph, fourth line down, starts light shall.
Mhm.
You have light shall sign, it should be shine.
Shine, yep.
Page 3, fifth paragraph. Asked if space number 20 is shown clipping. It's not space 20 so much as the turning motion for space 20. And that was all I had for that date.
Thank you.
one that starts with Mr. Schomer. Yeah, the sentence that says Mr. Schomer replied that the sidewalk on Main Street will be closed for the remainder, the duration of the project.
Mhm.
Might add the word construction.
Yes, yeah. Mm.
I don't have any other changes. Oh, because you were not at that meeting, right? Let's do that meeting. Yeah, take your time. We're still ahead of time. We can't start the other hearing yet, so.
In other words, you have 2.5 minutes.
You got time?
I'll take it.
Just those two changes. Thanks.
Thank you.
are we all set? Oh, sorry, I thought it was
Sorry, no,
for you.
you were, I was waiting for myself.
Okay, I
Okay.
didn't realize, so yeah, maybe we're okay. We can take a
I was
motion
taking my
then.
2 minutes. Okay, so I'd like to make a motion to approve the CPDC minutes from August 8th, 2022.
As listed.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Raise your hands. All opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so you got that, Andrew?
Yep.
John abstained because he wasn't there. Okay, we got that done. And
you.
now we're right back on time at
On
8:15.
time.
Was that?
Right on time.
8:15, I believe this is a public meeting for the minor site plan review for 0 Birch Meadow Drive, the Birch Meadow School / Park Complex. We do have a public meeting notice of this one. It's a courtesy. It's another courtesy notice. Do we read courtesy notices?
We didn't for the last one, so I suggest we don't.
Yeah.
I think that feels like kind of inconsistent, so let's just go ahead and proceed, okay. Do we have somebody here to present on this? Here we go.
I don't know where you want me to stay.
We want you to stand on that orange tape that says stand here.
Got your name on it.
Awesome. Good evening, members of the board. My name is Steve Crisafulli. I'm with Cpdc. We're a design firm out of Dedham. We've been working with the town. I'm a landscape architect. I believe one of my colleagues, our principal civil engineer, is going to be hopping on in case there are stormwater questions. We've worked with the town for a few years now, recently doing the stadium track and field. And a couple of years ago, we worked on the Birch Meadow master plan and numerous public meetings, user group interviews, public surveys help guide us to kind of starting to phase out the work at that complex. So we're here for phase 1, which includes the imagination station, I'll call it, which everyone refers to here.
Otherwise known as a parking lot.
And
Sorry.
Great imagination.
a central spine walkway kind of connecting the high school to Birch Meadow Drive. So I'm assuming you guys all saw the plans. So the improvements at the parking lot obviously include a more structured parking layout, stormwater management to protect the Abidjorna. It includes defined accessible entrance into the park, electric vehicle charging stations, site lighting, parking lot lighting, landscape improvements, basically really cleaning up that area and making more of a defined entrance into the complex. As part of it, we are adding a second curb cut exit out. And then the intent is to alleviate traffic on Bancroft and along Birch Meadow, that shorter section where there's like 4 parking spaces during games would be closed off, and that would allow visiting teams to pull in buses, unload, and get that out of the neighborhood. Believe offhand, I think it's like 50-ish, 55 spaces. 3 handicap, 3 electric vehicle, 1 of which is accessible. So I don't know if you want to go over the next section quick and then we do all the questions, or if you want to go over this first.
If people have questions about this, I think we should go ahead and ask them, and then if their questions pop up, we might go back to this, but.
John, who's moving?
Yeah, I have a couple
Yeah.
of questions. So just to sort of understand and make sure that I have my head wrapped around this, right? This is a really low spot, right? Sitting water, I'm sure you've seen that. It's a little bit hard to trace out the elevation, but it seems to me that especially closer to the softball field, that area is being raised up so that it's somewhat the same grade with Birch Meadow Drive and then is gonna slope down to the softball field?
Not quite. You are still coming in off of Birch Meadow with a little bit of a drop down.
Down.
Yeah.
All right. So keep that in mind. I guess that what I do want to make sure on this, and I know, right, there's been lots of discussion, but some of it is probably sort of in abstract thinking, and it's different when you have an actual set of plans. I am concerned about the functionality of that, what's now the western entrance, right? The newer entrance, the new curb cut, and how that functions 200 days a year, right? When there are drop off and pickup from Coolidge. And right, you've got the crosswalk there. That typically what happens is, right, cars in the morning, even in the afternoon too, cars line up, include and drop off kids right where that curb cut is. And then you have the crosswalk there with a crossing guard. So if people can make turning movements there, right where all these kids, right where there's a crossing guard and kids crossing the street, shortening the distance where kids get dropped off, having to cross over. Like there's a lot of movement there. If that is open during those school pickup and drop off, and I just want to make sure that the Coolidge principal is aware of sees this and comments on it, and the police department, right, because they employ the crossing guard. So that's one area of concern, and I guess really the biggest concern is just, if they're all fine and they have in their mind of how that drop off is going to work, I don't know whether they think that they're going to incorporate drop off and pickup, use this parking lot as part of the drop off pickup procedure there. Maybe that works better, but I just want to make sure that's.
We don't see on this where the crosswalk over to Coolidge is, right?
Oh, I'm looking at the rendering, and you can see that better.
Okay, perfect. Oh, it's right before. That's useful.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can certainly review that.
Yeah.
With Coolidge.
And then my other question, right, and I got to, like, on the other end, like the entrance in towards the track, right? If you can scroll up a little bit. Yeah, so my understanding is that right now that there are frequently, not all that frequently, but frequently enough vehicles that access that part of I'm going to call it the complex, by driving down that road, right? And now we have a curb a curb there, which is fine. Trucks can drive up over that curb. But with the landscaping, then it looks like a sort of narrow walkway. So I don't know if that's not like how that plays in.
So currently, as part of this last project, there are 2 bollards completely blocking that off, that only facilities has control of removing them. As part of this, we would either keep both of those, but we are also adding another one. And the purpose of being able to go down there is for emergency vehicles during games or for maintenance.
So is
But-
that
but
wide
can-
enough for the vehicles to get?
Yeah,
down
I
there?
guess that's really the point is could emergency vehicles get in through there navigating around the landscaping
So
and
there's
the lighting?
at the curve on the plans, there is a small section that's noted as mountable,
Okay,
right? So
Great.
an ambulance can pop right up.
Great.
Back in and then.
get up,
Yeah.
perfect.
Catch.
I assume the new curb cut is required for the buses to be able to drop off.
Oh, because otherwise the buses, yeah,
Can't
couldn't
turn
make
it
the
that-
turn
turn
like
around
that
and turn
tight
that,
turn,
yeah.
yeah.
And if it poses an issue, we could talk about having that, whether it's signage or a temporary barricade that exit's really closed most of the time. Maybe on weekends it's open.
Are
I
the
guess-
buses that come in, those would be for like high school
Those would be-
games, and this would basically be another way for them to get in instead of just always going over through the high school?
Yeah, and basically parking the visiting teams on Bancroft and leaving them there. Or on Birch Meadow, leaving them there. And the kids are walking across the park, and then there were complaints in those surveys and some of the initial meetings about when there are games with visiting teams, that there's no place.
I never
Yeah.
really realized
Yeah.
that's where they parked, okay.
But right, I think there's this trade-off that a discussion, not amongst us, but amongst others, of that trade-off between those that happen not infrequently, right? The high school has a lot of games, but also, you know, the other potential safety concerns that are at this crosswalk for younger kids, so.
And I think there, I don't know if it still is there, but isn't there for that whole Birch Meadow like the Birch Meadow Drive, isn't there like a safety group that takes a look at what's happening there? There was at least once upon a time when my son
Oh, I
was
think
at
there
Birch
was,
Meadow. Yeah. So that definitely, it's definitely worth asking, yeah.
Other than that, it looks great. I mean, I think this, right, huge, huge improvement over the gravel parking lot. It's,
Yeah, I understand the concerns on that second, on the new exit and entrance. I was out there today walking with conservation, and it is a little bananas in the parking lot during pickup, with cars just parking wherever, whipping around.
Yes.
yes,
So-
yes. Just curious, and you may not have the answer to this, is like, so how does that work with, and does it matter, right? You have a charge station, but also for a handicap spot, and so the utilization.
So that charge station really could only be used by somebody with a handicap placard.
Yeah.
Does anyone know?
It-
Yeah, yeah, I mean.
And it's
yeah.
to,
And it's important to have a handicap spot that is
Because
also
some-
EV, right?
yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
it's all still a little new.
yes,
Especially for like larger vehicles that are electric.
yeah.
So I don't know if that's a temporary signage until it gets figured out a little further that whoever's here first, if the accessible spaces are full and it's not necessarily an electric vehicle, that it
Yeah,
is
I don't
open
think,
for
I think we went through
accessible
that. I think that's not legal.
I don't
Yeah,
remember
I
going
think
through
we
that,
went
but
through
it's
that
also,
on
it's kind of
another
like
site
unethical
where
to say
like.
use it less somebody needs
yeah,
it, cause
yeah.
you don't know if somebody's gonna
Yeah.
need it.
Especially with that being the one van spot, you know, we want it to be open.
So what you do is you have handicap parking in front of the EV charger to allow for parking, and then you make sure the EV charger, the cable can stretch
Which
to
is
the next
attached
parking
to-
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah, that's what I was
Well,
wondering,
that's-
is there a way to
so-
position it between the two parking spaces, so,
Exactly.
That
yeah.
is what, yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
The electric vehicle, the single station has its own, The second one is dual. So the cable is long enough.
Okay.
I'm sorry, this is turning into 20 questions on EV spots. But I notice here, and I know in the center of town, right, that there is that space in between the two EV spots, like it's like in the handicap spot.
There's like
What's
5 different scenarios that you can do. As long as your width meets the requirements, so those spaces are wider than a normal spot. So you either have a wider space and not that 3-foot aisle, or you have a normal space and a 3-foot aisle. It's not treated the same as accessible parking.
The EV parking in particular.
And that's like a new standard, IDE
that's
standard that are.
Massachusetts, yeah.
Is the surface of that, I'm just thinking about, and I'm sorry, if I look closely at the plans, I would just be able to see it, but would you give like a 1-minute overview of what you're doing for stormwater in that area since it's so wet? I'm just curious.
So we're really almost mimicking existing grades because we can't change them that much with groundwater levels. So we're accounting for sheet flow into the middle island. So it'll be guardrail, wood guardrail. That is one treatment area. The second is almost where you see that walkway kind of veering off to the right.
Yeah.
From there to that last spot is the same thing. No curb, sheet flow, and then on the planting plan, on the grading plan, you can see kind of like the swath that is the second treatment area.
And is that center island, is that mounded or is that
No, it's
depressed to be
depressed.
able to accept it? Yeah.
Is there anything, is that just like whatever they call it, LID, right? It's just a swale, there's nothing, there's no.
It's essentially planted as a rain garden. Soils, plants.
Have pollinator plants in there too.
We can plan for that.
Consider it. You may as well. If it's all compatible with what's needed for the stormwater uptake, of course. All right,
I'm done with the questions on.
so that was the parking lot. Any other questions on the parking lot? And I think what we'll do for our very extensive audiences here tonight is we'll hold audience questions until the end.
That's good.
So I don't know if you want to go to the second.
Yeah, so where do you want us to go next
So the
here?
second portion is that connection path, connecting the high school to Birch Meadow, and then again from here, phase 2 and phase 3 will go off of that. So this is a 10-foot wide paved walkway, accessible and maintainable for DPW, and also allows, we haven't gotten a firm answer whether or not the police department would want to do patrols through there. But it has the ability. In kind of the middle of the walkway, kind of where that existing tree grove is, there's a proposed restroom, storage, picnic pavilion, and then just above that is a lacrosse practice wall that would be kind of tied into that turf field that was done a few years ago. And then the rest of it is essentially, again, accessible walkway, path lighting for safety, benches, landscape improvements. So the building, the existing green storage building that's out there is sort of a maintenance nightmare from facilities point of view, with the roof needing replacement and there's like holes in the building. We would remove that to allow for the path to come through. This new building would have 2 restrooms and adequate storage for the recreational groups and potentially also high school, with half of it being a covered picnic area. And yeah, this is essentially kind of the proposed look. We do have a meeting tomorrow just to confirm some other materials and furnishings, but
Questions or comments on this part?
Start. So, I guess I'll start on this is a little convoluted on how to describe this. So let's start actually with the grade, right? Since we started with that last time, right that area where the building is going, yeah, right? That's wet, like 7 months out of the year. And so, right, my presumption is that a lot of this area is coming up.
a little bit, not too much to throw off grades, but yeah.
Cause right, like
And that's
you nodded your head, that specifically that little area right there is a pond.
Yep, your shoes will
Like,
get pretty wet going
more
through
times
there.
than not. Yeah, and when it's not a pond, you can only like walk through there in August when it's, when we're in the middle of a drought. So that I would make sure, like I'm sure other people are telling you that, like that's right. Be horrible to build that nice building and then not be able to get to it because it's underwater. So, but starting, I guess my biggest concern here is the walkway out that comes out to Birch Meadow. Right, that section between where the building that you're taking down is, which is fine. I assume that that Reading Youth Softball knows that that's happening and they've all worked that out. So, but I will say the alignment of this, if I remember correctly, that not the foul line, but the field of play of the softball field is our two poles, right? So it looks like this is right about at the edge of play, right? Mind you, this is a varsity girls softball field, so right, can't be taking away some of that, right?
That solid line
Yeah.
right above the S sewer line, that's the foul line.
Right, so there's a foul line.
There's field of play can be anywhere because there's.
Right, but there's got to be something outside the field of play. I'm just giving you perspective that the existing field of play is two poles that I'm also going to put
Utility poles.
two utility poles. I also noticed that you're leaving the two utility poles in place, and I don't know if you picked up on this. I would think that this is in your area, right? They're right at the edge of pavement.
Mhm.
At the edge of pavement. And so that therefore makes the 10-foot width, right? Like that's not the way, right? Because it narrows down. What?
The 10-foot width of the path.
It's right on the edge of on the pavement. And so then you can't use the whole edge, the whole paved area, because you always have, when you build a path, you have that 2-foot clearance
On either side.
on either side.
Yeah, I see what
Yes.
you're saying,
And
yes.
so by leaving the poles there, you then are effectively limiting the path. The presumption here is there's going to be little kids riding their tricycles or whatever on the path, and there's going to be a pole that's right next to them. So there's two poles that are being left here. I would think that there's a lot of work, that those poles are in the way to begin with. like men's, like they're in the middle of the softball field. I don't know. Like I would advocate that
There's some softball
someone.
experience happening here, yeah.
Yeah, I would advocate that if that those
So the-
we'd look at moving
Town,
those
we're
poles.
trying to obviously limit the scope, and as of right now, we would be transitioning power underground from there. Removing those poles will then relocate the electrical to try and maintain the existing older field lighting.
Yeah.
That is part of the next phase. So we're planning for the upgraded lighting in the next phase. We'll definitely review it with the town again. We did talk about those poles that are adjacent to the walkway having pads.
They have
I've never
I'm gonna
noticed
say,
them.
what's that?
I've never noticed them.
Here, I'll show you right here.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, we would.
See those two poles with
Oh,
the
yeah,
pad?
yeah.
Right. I mean, they're like
And they're
essentially
big
in the
poles.
middle of the field.
And they are in the field of play, yeah.
Yeah, they're not in the field of play, but like.
They're right there.
Yeah, they're right there.
So I'm assuming that for that path, there's like very little wiggle room also. I mean, I kind of like how it
We're
meanders
just being
around.
on the
It's like,
buffer.
I'm glad it's not straight, yeah.
So I have I'll negotiate you a trade-off, right? That you also have lighting, right? That is being proposed along the walkway. Now, let's think about that. This field gets used, or this whole area, right, gets used at nighttime a lot. But when the field gets used, the bigger lights are on. So therefore, you don't need lights along the walkway because the field is lit up.
On those
That's a
nights.
decision for the town if
Right,
lights
and
on at night.
right, and so, right, I would advocate that, that you not leaving lights on in this area that's immediately adjacent to, the conservation area, right? That you leave those lights on any longer than they need to be for use. We have the floodlights on when it's actually being used. I don't know why we would pay to have lights along the pathway. To me, that seems like
For that section of the path.
for that section of the path. I understand the rationale, like from where that diamond is over towards the towards the high school, right? That isn't lit up by floodlights.
Dark, right.
That's dark, but this whole area here, like from the, I assume that police would want lighting around the picnic table area. But from that area to Birch Meadow, I think that lighting is probably ineffective.
Well, and you've got the lighting from the street there too.
Yeah. So that's my trade-off, is get rid of that lighting, but also look at moving those poles, right? I'll just say, right, doing all this great work, nice new pathway, and having these poles like right in the way, the town will get a lot of flack. I mean, it would look half done.
I feel like I've seen like lighting structures only come up about this high around newer paths.
That's actually, I have a question about the type of lighting that you would have on the paths, if it'd be high lighting or low lighting.
On the pathways, it would be 12, 15 foot pathway. Pedestrian scale lighting. Parking lot would be a little bit taller, but the lights that are actually outside of the stadium right now, that is the same fixture.
Yeah.
And the light spill,
Which are nice.
yeah, the light spill is zero cutoff
Yeah.
at the wetland.
Yeah, I did see that, it's
Yeah.
stuff.
But, right, let's be real on the light spill issue, right? There's no direct light, but it's still providing
Well, I'm
Illumination.
actually because it still is providing illumination, and I'm wondering if it would be appropriate since it is through, it's a dark area, so you want the path to be lit. You
But only
kind of don't
while in
wanna have,
use.
while in use, you don't necessarily wanna be inviting, all night stuff this is another comment I have in general. I'm wondering if the lower lighting would be actually more appropriate going through the darker forest area, so it's lighting the pathway, but not being just yet another thing that all the neighbors around there have to kind of see. Even if there's not light spill, you still see the lights. Wondering what you think
There's
about that.
trade-off with the bollard lighting, you need more because your coverage for safe foot candle coverage isn't as great. So you'd have a lot more of them. We can certainly talk to the town about that.
Yeah, and is the town, just remind me, like, is the town, I mean, I realize that we're talking about this now, we don't have many people now. Are the neighbors, has the town gotten like recent input from the neighbors on this particular project, or on the lighting in particular, or is this the
Yeah, this was all presented.
Okay, good, alright.
Yeah, and I guess I'm curious when you say the town, right? Certainly all your work done on the turf was through the school committee or through the,
School committee,
yeah,
recreation,
And recreation.
recreation.
engineering.
And so, and this is the same or,
Recreation is heading with engineering.
all right,
School committee in terms of facilities is that side
Yeah.
for this.
Yeah.
I have okay, sorry, you weren't we're probably not done with your questions yet.
no, that's, probably some other might pop up.
So
but
I
that
have a
one-
couple of questions also around that center area where the lacrosse wall and the pavilion is. Lacrosse wall, is there it looks like, I just wanna kind of confirm, there's a hard platform there also, cause while it's not as wet as the puddle where the pavilion is, it's also kind of constantly a muddy area, and if kids are standing there all the time, it's never going to get grassy or dry.
So that's gonna be built up to the elevation of the existing turf field,
Turf, okay.
which if you're standing behind there, it's maybe a foot.
Yeah,
And that's essentially an extension of that turf field.
and it has a surface then also?
Sure.
Okay,
So that
So,
it's not mud, it's not,
yeah.
so is that athletic department? I mean, I would assume that the athletic department would have been okay and reviewed that and
yeah, that was
to me,
actually.
that's a little bit of an odd thing that behind the goal you have this other space that's accessible, right?
Oh,
Right,
wait, but
you
this
usually-
would it still be outside the
Outside.
fence?
Yeah,
It's still outside the fence?
It's not accessible from in the field.
Yeah, but then you have a viewing spot that's directly behind the goal.
It's there now, though.
No, it's not.
Well, those kids climb up on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But right, it's like that's just a surprise to me
Yeah.
that that's the way that you'd want to set that up. As opposed to having it be a little bit offset so that you're not right in the goalies.
Well, it's a good question to ask of the athletics department, actually, because I wonder, I'm trying to remember, like, on the other side now, there's like a fabric barrier that is behind there, and I'm wondering, I'm trying to think
There's
of mine.
fabric.
There is fabric on this side also,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
And athletics has reviewed, this was actually intended to be done earlier as part of that turf project.
They're good, I'm good.
Is the crosswalk something that's fenced off?
No.
It's just open, okay.
Currently, they're pounding lacrosse balls against the school. So this is to alleviate that, and it's an issue everywhere with lacrosse.
I have to ask a question, and I know so many entities have looked at this and are probably good with it. I'm surprised at the location of the bathrooms and the picnic areas. They are central, which is good, it's also an area that to me seems like it will be an attractive nuisance for kids hanging out at night, and it being like tucked back behind there further from any street. And I'm wondering just if that came up anywhere else. It's like, I don't know if we want to make like a grand suggestion to move it to a different location, but I'm really surprised that people thought that would be a good idea.
I had the same exact thought, and like trying to figure out what you're looking at and what you can see, right? Because right now it is right in a little bit of a divot there. And so if you're out on Birch Meadow, you can't see that spot. If you're coming at the park, like you can't see that spot.
It's very hidden from the streets.
Yeah, you can't really see that particular spot, I think, from pretty much anywhere except if you're like peering down the softball field.
Yeah, or like at the lacrosse ball, yeah.
You can see it from the road because of the trees that are there. They're not low.
Right. You get a glimpse.
So it is obviously central.
Yeah.
It is relative to phase 2, phase 3 of the overall plan, where improvements elsewhere in the park wouldn't allow for that building. And from the beginning, we've been talking about cameras that are directly wired to the police station. Not
Your bike cops coming too, they've been restored.
What's that?
Bicycle cops have been restored, so.
Yeah. But right, you don't want to set something up where, right, like no, that's all good, right? But you don't want to set something up where, like every Friday night, they're
police have to
like
be
you right, we're monopolizing police,
No, they'll be at the town forest too.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I think it's a lot more efficient to
Yeah,
locate
yeah,
something like
yeah.
that within easy view of community members and not relying on surveillance
Yeah,
cameras and
yeah,
bicycle
yeah.
police.
But
I don't know what to
not
do
really,
about
right,
that,
not really in
other
this
than looking at
phase,
this
so,
saying, well,
yeah.
there's a problem waiting to happen right there.
I think you mentioned that one of the citing reasons was future phases. Would future phases help alleviate this concern about sightlines to the bathroom area?
potentially. I mean, there's no plans to cut that tree grove down, but future plans propose a bigger piece of turf or grass being a multi-use field, basically from the walkway to the parking lot. It would open it up definitely a little bit more. From Bancroft, I don't think that would change. But again, when we started looking at other locations, then other groups are saying, well, now it's not near baseball and Little League and tennis.
Well, like, so for example, is there a reason to not put it, how do I describe this? There's the location where it is, there's the big rise there, and then over on the other side, there's a flattish area that is oftentimes used as like a gathering place if you're taking photos over by the Majors field. Is there a reason to not put it there? I mean, I realize that it's further away from the softball fields, but it's not all that far away.
As of right now, phase 2 is trying to get basketball courts in there.
On where the grass is now, instead of where the basketball courts are now,
Because there's a big push for pickleball.
to make
So
the
the courts would be reorganized.
I'm not gonna second guess that. I know.
I'm not gonna
there's a lot,
second guess
yeah,
that. I guess I would put a court where the pavilion is now and put the pavilion where there's lots of activities and bathrooms and places to picnic tables and things to hang out on. I'd put that in the more visible location. My recommendation. But I also realize that a lot of thought has gone into the overall configuration. So I guess I'm not saying, oh, move it. But, you know, to the folks that you're working with who are very directly involved with this, please relay that it's an obvious attractive nuisance to me.
my concern, right, which is actually a Title IX issue, is that the girls' softball field is, it just sort of not addressing those polls goes to the continued laughability about how bad that softball field is compared to, the boys, right, the boys' facilities. So it's like just one of those other things, and it's going to be a little stick, they couldn't even move the poles when everything else was done. So.
Is there not, so yeah, what I'm hearing is that there will be community feedback on that if these goals aren't addressed. And so it'd be wonderful to find a way to take care of them sooner than later.
We'll definitely revisit that.
Okay.
And I was going to ask a question, but I think about the sort of and just tell me if I'm wrong or if there's a different issue, right? I'd like to see the least amount of disturbance possible and over toward on the other side of the hill, right, towards the high school, right? You're realigning the existing paved area, right? And it's turning to the right instead of to the left, in which case causing sort of more, it looks like there's more disturbance because you're taking that up. There's nothing wrong with the alignment of the existing pathway for its use as a pathway, but what I heard you say is that you're trying to make sure that you can have cars travel it, and that's probably
Cars and courts in that area. So in order to get the courts to work.
That's why you have to move the path.
Gotcha. All right. That makes sense.
Other comments from CPDC? Any comments from, any public comments? Ms. Herrick?
Karen Herrick, 9 Vince Road.
You have to stand on the thing, on the, please, so that people can see you.
Couple of questions, I think I know the answer. The restoration of the wetlands over near the parking lot, are those gonna be wet all the time? Are they really wet? I haven't been down there. Or is that an area that could potentially have a couple of park benches? Be some sort of an enjoyable garden? And Chuck was on the line, he might know better.
I'm sorry, when you're just so that we're all following on, are you talking about the Castine field or?
Back to the parking lot.
The
the parking lot, the imagination
Storing
station,
wetlands,
okay, yeah, okay.
Because I think I see wetlands plants and I was just wondering.
So the wetlands plants are the actual wetland area. The pathway to the left of that is an accessible connection from Birch Meadow, and that is planned with educational signage, kind of as a walking path. We can certainly talk to them about adding a bench in there too, making it more of a little garden area. Is that what you were?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, if there was any room over there to be a seating area, a garden area, or it's all too wet. That's what I wasn't really sure.
I think that's all pretty high above the stream. So if it can fit, right, I don't think there's a wetland issue there, per se, a wetness issue.
On the path, yeah.
Yeah. I will say, since you brought it up, right, that whole area, even that used to just be this brambles, and when you guys started construction, and it actually, and you ended up clearing it out because you were not you, but right, stuff was getting stored there. It started to look kind of nice because all of everything that was growing underneath got cleared out, and you could sort of see the stream and some of the stuff there.
Who that was not up for the contractor. We did notice that today.
That's the Aberjona there, right?
Yes.
It would be neat to have a little, And I like, the other thing that's nice about benches is, yes, if the stream is there, it's nice to enjoy it. Near schools, near parking lots, near fields, you're always waiting for someone, and so, and actually having a place to sit down and is nice.
Yeah, that's actually right near that crosswalk is probably not a bad
Yeah,
location either, underneath the tree there, so.
Okay, I've been, since we lost GB Mon, I've been kind of thinking about, especially with this project, is there some area that could be a little bit of a memorial and again, he'd been talking about restoring, but again, I just wanted to know if it was all swamp and cattails or whether there's an option, so okay. And then another question, you guys asked a lot of great questions, but are any of these pathways, are they gonna be pervious pavement as part of this plan? Is that a possibility? Has anybody talked about that?
We've talked about it. At this point, no. It's
Because,
and what was the reason for that? I actually meant to ask that, thank you.
cost,
Maintenance cost or construction cost?
both.
So.
Go impervious.
So thinking about that, and I'm gonna ask you, Heather, more because you might know this, right? Like for a 10-foot wide impervious area, right? You have that runoff that goes, right? It's just sheet runoff. Like, are you really? Do we think that it would really change the water sort of the
It's a good
impact?
question.
Yeah, I mean, because it is pretty minor in what is also a pretty expansive place
Yeah, so it
of
was
catchment
surrounded,
area.
it's surrounded by natural surface. So
Yeah.
all of the runoff from the 10-foot wide path is going to go into the groundwater.
Yeah,
And it's not gonna be at like a high velocity or anything
right,
like that.
because
Yeah. It is nice to use impervious surface when I was just out actually at a beautiful path that was using impervious pavement in I think it was Worcester or what, a town out that way. It was gorgeous, funded by the Land Water Conservation Fund. But yeah, it's nice, and that was also right by a lake where it was a little bit more impactful right there. Like it was right along the lake. Yeah.
and also I was asking, I mean, just because the whole area is so sensitive and so wet, and then, I don't know, so you mentioned the sheet running off.
Yeah.
So is that gonna cause puddling in some of those fields that are gonna be around there now that you're gonna have a path going through there?
It'd be different if we were putting the parking lot towards that area. The walkways aren't. It's not gonna.
So how much does pervious surface cost compared to?
Offhand, I can't say that.
I mean, did we say cost, but we didn't even look at it, or just in general, it still costs more, or?
Oh yeah, the base that is required for asphalt versus the base for pervious is like twice the depth of stone, and honestly, oftentimes that impervious asphalt or pervious asphalt gets clogged, and so maintenance, if they're not on top of it, it's useless. It turns into a regular asphalt walkway.
I don't even know how you maintain it.
It's just keeping it clean, so it is more maintenance cost. Yeah.
That's it, thank you.
Any other questions from Zoom? Or comments? Is Chuck the only one with us on Zoom?
Chuck and Steve Spear and Jackie McCarthy from the site.
Yeah, it's great.
It's very
It is,
exciting.
yeah.
So, are we voting on this?
I leave that to you guys, but I would say conservation is discussing the project on Wednesday.
Okay,
Talking to public safety, I think there's still some things we'd also like to flush out on turning movements and kind of logistics related to that crosswalk and drive to entry. So I think a continuance just to kind of digest some of these things.
and then ultimately, even though this is a town project, we do vote on it, that's what I was.
Yeah, we are going through minor site plan process and we'll vote on the decision for conditions, and we did so for the library project
Great.
back in spring.
I remember that. So we should, if it's all right, move to continue this until
7:30 on 1/9 should be okay.
Great, I'd like to make a motion to continue the minor site plan review of 0 Birch Meadow Drive, Birch Meadow School Park Complex to January 9th, 2023 at 7:30 PM.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Good work.
Okay. Well then, we're on to just updates and minutes. Do you all, we have to do the September 12th minutes, right?
We do, yes.
Why don't we take it out of order and just get those done and out of the way and then do the updates?
Well, actually, Madam Chairman, if I could recommend the updates for anybody who's listening at home,
Oh,
because
yes, that's true. Okay, yes, 'cause yeah.
other than that, you're watching us not move for.
I know, you're right.
Complaints about that. I turned in expecting to
You're
see
right.
you doing something. You weren't doing it.
Okay, we'll save that till the end. Thank you very much. Why don't we just take these in the order that they're listed on the agenda? So the first is the update on the MBTA communities.
Sure, so there's not a huge update. I did just want to kind of re-summarize where we're at with MBTA communities and just kind of what's expected locally from the town. So I put together just this quick presentation. There's nothing you probably don't already know on it. But just again, high-level summary of MBTA communities, where we are, next steps, and maybe the process that we're looking to plan in the coming year. So MBTA communities, for those at home watching don't know, it's a state legislation to Chapter 40A, Section 3A, adopted in 2021. There's been some final guidance from DHCD and partners, which also had a number of revisions throughout the year. The intent is to create a zoning district of reasonable size that allows multi-family housing units, which is defined as 3+ units in one structure, by right around transit stations, which Reading is home to the Reading Depot, commuter rail depot. So the zoning district location requirements, a portion of our zoning district has to be within a half mile of that train depot. A district must also maintain a gross density of 15 units per acre across the entire district, so we have to prove that that's feasible and works out number-wise. And the developments and zoning also has to be suitable for families with children, which means no age restrictions, no restrictions on bedroom counts or bedroom size or occupant limits, as defined per this legislation. So just a brief background, Reading is in interim compliance at the moment. We did give a briefing to the select board in May of this year, and we submitted our community information sheet in May as well. So that got us to interim compliance, but for the next step to remain in that interim compliance, we do need to submit the action plan form by the end of January 2023, which really is not a super heavy lift, nor is it binding. Really, it's just a checklist of what the community expects to do, whether it's amend existing zoning, create a new overlay zoning, or a combination of both, or if you feel you meet by right already. So we are looking to do that. And then to final compliance, you have to have a district compliance application and prove that your zoning district complies by December 31st, 2024. So that's a bit spread out because they know of town meeting deadlines and the public engagement that's very likely in a high number of communities around this. But that's where we're aiming for, comply by end of 2024. So again, stepping back to what does by right mean in terms of this zoning, it would be allowed by right by zone. No special permit, no variance, no zoning amendment needed, no waiver granted for units, or other discretionary approval is required. Site plan review can be allowed, but cannot unreasonably delay nor impose conditions on a development that make it financially or timely infeasible. And 40R plan review is allowed, and Reading is home to a successful 40R district. But the 20 units per acre that's considered by right is what they're looking at. Anything granted by a waiver or existing multifamily really does not apply. So we're taking the entire zone, giving it 20 units per acre, and that's really kind of what we get. So we're used to waivers here due to a variety of factors, but just wanted to note that.
I have a question about
Yes.
that. So go back, if you wouldn't mind going back. So when it says units granted under a waiver request shall not count toward unit capacity, does that mean units where it's way more per acre, but that they were granted with waiver requests, those don't count, or those still do count because they're way more than 20 units per acre?
So they're gonna take the parcel, the existing parcel size, and give it because our zoning allows 20 units per acre, that's what they'll calculate. So if a lot was granted a density of 55 units per acre, that doesn't really matter. It's almost as if a development never happened. They're gonna look at lot size and calculate what 20 units per acre on that lot would result in.
For including the newer projects that have just been built?
Correct. So,
Basically, it ignores like what's that, it's just.
right, existing structures are pretty
It
much
ignores all
ignored.
the incentives that we give for higher density.
Yep.
Awesome.
And this is towards the calculation of the number of units we need to allow in that area.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Just stepping on to another aspect of this, which comes up a lot, affordability restrictions in eligible districts. Actually, they're not required under the legislation. There is no requirement that any municipality include affordability or inclusionary zoning in their districts, but it is recommended by many players involved locally, regionally, and more. So they've added new guidance on affordability requirements for a district, and really what they're looking at is a local requirement for a percentage of units in a development to be deed restricted for no less than 30 years and eligible on the SHI listing, which deed restricted affordable units do count towards, and not to go down that whole path of jargon and language, or listed as workforce housing, which is a bit different and not counted on the SHI, but is a style of, I guess, housing development that communities can require. So, for example, we require 25% of rental affordable units in our 40R. What's in line with what they're considering for a zoning district is a 10% requirement on unit counts in a development. If you want to exceed a 10% requirement, you have to prove that it's financially feasible and development wouldn't be restricted. And how you do that, there's still a lot of questions on that. We have a lot of successful developments here that prove that. So the exception they added recently is that 40R districts with 25% requirements can be used. So that our 40R district does comply with a lot of these requirements based on the new guidance.
So that's a big change. I mean, that's a big, yeah.
Yeah, the previous cap was 20%, even though you would have to prove a 20% requirement. 25% for existing 40Rs at this time are accepted, which is good.
For existing 40Rs or for the existing 40R zone?
Sorry, repeat that question.
For existing 40Rs, i.e. Development, or for the existing 40R zone, meaning we can include everything in the zone?
Existing 40R zones, thank you.
Well, what
Because all of this is about the zone.
Right.
The land area has nothing to do with what's actually built.
Correct, and our deeded affordable unit counts that we've developed doesn't really matter in terms of our unit capacity or what we're aiming to zone to provide.
What the zone could handle if everything were
Right.
torn down and had to start again.
Right.
Yes.
Silly exercise.
Which is,
What I thought Tony was gonna ask was if like we change the zoning boundary, do we lose our special permission for an existing 40R?
That's a very good question. Did not consider that. Note that.
yeah, then we start from scratch if we change the boundary.
Right.
Yeah, or as long as we leave our regulation. It goes through, I don't know.
Good question. I'll look into that. I don't have the answer right now. So similar on the higher percentage requirements of units, if you want deeper affordability, 80% is considered, 80% average median income is considered in line with by right development. If you want deeper affordability, similar to increased affordability, like a 50% average median income requirement, you must demonstrate again that the development is feasible. Onto what a reasonable size district and how that's determined. So they give you kind of two blanket scenarios, 50 acres straight or 1.5% of your developable land within your station area, I believe is how that was determined, developable land in the MBTA community, whichever is less. Reading actually falls in the latter, which we'll get to in a minute. At least half of your districts must comprise of contiguous lots. You can't be all over the map. And portions of a district that's less than 5 acres of contiguous land will not account towards the land area requirements. For example, A40 has a number of pockets across town. A number of those might not apply if they're less than 5 acres. There's again some flexibility there if we can prove that a unit capacity and district acre can meet in a less than 5 acre area, but hard to do. So 2 or more districts can be considered for the entire project cumulatively, as long as each independently meets the 15 units gross density and land area size requirements. So again, a certain portion of our districts needs to be within a half mile of the depot. Sorry, now I'm getting into so unit capacity, similar, was determined based on your existing housing stock, 15% of such, or taking your developable land area within your station area, half mile around the depot, times 15 units per acre, this time whichever is greater. So unit capacity can't exceed 25% of your total housing stock regardless, and the entire district at that 15 units per acre requirement, and a certain capacity has to be zoned within the half mile of the depot and proved to be able. So other considerations in zoning as we go forward under this is potentially planning for any water and wastewater infrastructure in new districts or amended districts or existing districts where we may look to allow multifamily by right. And then the thought that public and private right-of-ways, public land, and other may not be accounted for in our developable land calculation, but they are actually used to determine gross density compliance in the district. So while we can't develop on them, they're acting as if it almost is in terms of gross density. So that restricts the other parcels almost to a higher number.
Yeah.
So a bit odd there, but just to consider as we go forward. So how does this all apply locally? Great question. Existing housing stock is just over 9,950. They've calculated our developable station area at 343 acres. So our unit capacity comes out to 1,493 total units is what we have to zone for. I believe that's based on that, on the developable land area times 15 units per acre. Because we're commuter rail community, and because of our amount of developable station area, they give you a range of percentage for units to be within the half mile of the depot. We come out at just under 600 units that need to be zoned for around the depot. And our Reading required reasonable district size is a total of 43 acres we have to zone for. 43 acres in 1, 2, or 3 zoning district, whatever it is we decide to look for. That's the number we have to get to. So 40% of that has to be within a half mile of the depot, which comes to just over 17 acres within that station area. So we can take that 17 acres, zone for 600 units, but then we still need to find zoning and unit capacity for the remaining push anywhere else in town. So
our developable, this is gonna sound like a silly question, but our developable station area includes areas that are already developed.
correct, for the most part.
Andrew, quick question, that 1493, that's the total number of units. Is that total number of multifamily units or total number of units?
Multi-family units,
Of 3 or more units per?
correct.
Okay.
So again, applying locally, just quickly looking at existing zones that allow multifamily by right. Business A does, Business C sub-districts do, A40 and A80 across town do, as well as our 40R overlays both the downtown and the gateway smart growth. And also what existing zoning allows multifamily by special permit, just as it is a use allowed for consideration. We actually don't have a lot. It's allowed in PRD overlay developments, and PUD by special permit, but those would not be considered a by right process regardless, because that's just a lot of involvement, town meeting, planning board review, and so on. I don't think those would be eligible, nor would we want to really change that. So Reading's likely going to need to amend existing zoning requirements, add new zoning, or amend or other creative solutions to meet unit capacity. So talking 40R, talking business A, talking industrial, talking A40, A80, I guess that's kind of what we need to do to determine where it is we want to go. Because we're gonna look to consider almost anything in those districts, from dimensional controls like lot size, setbacks, height, lot coverage requirements, to parking requirements, to resource areas and how they can impact a development, the zone's access to amenities like open space, commercial areas, and transit, as well as any additional inclusionary zoning. So that's a lot to digest, but the expected next steps are that we will submit the action plan by January 31st to remain in interim compliance. We want to continue discussions with Cpdc and other stakeholders. You know, we're considering a potential joint meeting with Cpdc and select board, maybe ZBA, town meeting members, and other stakeholders. Like, things are still being fleshed out, but we want guidance from near all, because it's such a large discussion, and I know it's a lot to put on you guys as leaders of it through zoning, but it's very much a community discussion on potential change in town. So, you know, we'd like to look to focus our annual March workshop on multifamily housing zoning, but for me, we would need something specific to like be able to present at it, as well, like potential amendments or potential areas to rezone. So we did apply for technical assistance. We're part of the early technical assistance right now, but we were expecting the findings of that early TA. Our zoning districts are put into their compliance model tool to give feedback on our zoning and kind of what we can expect unit capacity under existing zoning versus what we could amend to increase that. We expected those findings mid-November. We have not gotten anything since. We have not heard. We asked for a few updates and they say it's coming pretty soon. They got sidetracked with other of the tool needs. They did release the tool to everybody, so it is available, but we're still waiting the findings from that. That would probably better help guide us in terms of what zoning we might look at, because we could look at two potential paths forward, right? And I guess one that I would call the path of least resistance, which is looking at minor amendments to existing zoning that might get us to the unit capacity counts. But really not inflict a lot of change on town because a lot of the areas are already substantially developed or outside of really where we might want some of these developments. And then the second path would be maybe like if we are looking at real potential change and where Reading is in terms of that 1493 number and how we really get there to help solve what is a housing crisis, and the numbers and data that we've learned through our housing production plan update and we hear continuously throughout the state. That's a lot more work and a lot more community conversation, because it might look at amending the S15 district, it might look at expanding 40R, it might look at looking at A40 expansion or similar mixed use in industrial and business A. So there's a lot of other creative solutions too, like form-based code is rising across the nation, especially on the West Coast. It's unclear how that would apply but to MBTA communities, but 40R has starter home districts and so on we can look at. So that's basically where we are and what MBTA communities is. So it's a lot of info, but
I have a couple questions.
Mhm.
Again, so the action plan form
Mhm.
that needs to be submitted by January 31st, what does that need to include? Like, what is that?
So it's a checklist of what we expect to do, amend existing zoning or create new overlay or new zoning. Or like it's like
But
a
we
checklist,
don't
there's
need
like
to say
four,
what
right?
we're going to
Or-
do, we just need to say we're gonna take a look at this.
You don't have to be so specific in this case.
So, or like, just to frame things out, they just barely had a tool
Mhm.
that maybe works and maybe doesn't. If they're not able to give it to us and help us out, I'm sure that most other towns, they don't have anything. And it's what? December, right?
Right,
Like, I don't-
right, I'm
right?
thinking the same thing.
Yeah, and so within 6 weeks, every town is supposed to provide this action plan.
Yep.
Right, so that's just,
And
right,
they are
like-
offering zero assistance, basically, even they aren't following through on the assistance that they offer.
Right, so there's a small amount of communities in early TA. Full technical assistance been released for applications, but we haven't heard feedback on if or when we'd be awarded. Reading did submit an
We were one of
application.
the early technical assistance.
Right, so then there's like full technical assistance like throughout this timeline and project. The early TA was also really for them to use their tool and see if it's working as they intended to. And then give us some feedback as well as a.
So at the legislative level, right, our communication between town and the legislature, right, we're not the only ones in this position, but we should, because we have that assistance, be in front of everyone else. And if we're not in a good position, right, like our legislators probably should have a better sense that we're not slacking, that they just don't, right, you can't do this by January 31st, and hopefully, right, that there's something at the legislative level that's gonna happen that pushes that date off, because no one
I
can
think
do
that's.
Is there any communication happening?
No, I don't think they intend to move this date. The action plan is non-binding and it is a simple lift of check the boxes and give a brief explanation. So I think that's their goal, just to make sure we are talking about it and looking to do something. We do have to give a proposed schedule as well of zoning amendments that, and when.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No.
But the thing that's binding then is the 2023 date, right? So if we still aren't getting assistance in time enough to even be considering amendments, I'm just thinking the legislature
Yeah.
will be a new legislature.
Oh, right, yeah.
Like, you know,
Mhm.
15 days
Yeah.
before, you know, basically
Yes.
days before this
Mhm.
first deadline. But then there is another deadline, and that is presumably a binding deadline. We have to do something by then. So we basically would have to do something by November in order to be compliant. And if we aren't getting, am I right?
2024.
2024,
2024,
yes. Right, so the action plan, they will, you know, continuously look for updates of where we are at and what we're doing in terms of this, but, and then they could revoke our interim compliance if we're not doing anything, but,
What are you looking for us to provide so that you can fill out that form?
I'm looking for feedback on just, we're gonna look to probably in the interim, I guess that path of least resistance is my assumption too.
Well, if we don't, right, the problem is like, we don't even know what because we don't have any numbers,
Mhm.
we don't even know how big or little that the
Mhm.
step is that
Yeah,
we
like
need to
I'm
enact.
wondering how vague can we be? You had a
That's
question.
what I was
How-
going to say,
how-
can we be so vague enough to say like we will potentially
these
change the zoning?
Yes.
Like, can we
Like,
be
is
vague
that
enough to
all?
say, we will wait until we get the information from this assistant? I said, you know,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and you probably wouldn't phrase it exactly like that, but depending on the information that we get from the technical
Yeah.
assistance process, we will formulate zoning that will get us to those goals.
Mhm.
Is that enough?
I think so.
I think
In
because
this
I think
step,
there's
that's
nothing
all we
else that you can
yeah,
say.
That's
Yeah.
really all we
Right.
can do.
I wouldn't commit to path of least resistance, full on zoning until we have some sort of information that
Yeah,
has been
my
offered
plan
to
was
us.
to check as many boxes as they allow me to. Try to,
Stay in their good graces.
yeah, and then
Yeah.
we'll figure it out.
Well, for interim compliance, one of the check boxes was you had to do a presentation before the select board, I thought.
Mhm.
So, I don't know if it's one of the boxes, but you can say that we held a meeting on,
Yes,
Number
we've
12
already,
with the
they've checked that,
CPDC.
we were
Boom.
good there.
Yeah.
So if I remember correctly from some previous discussions, right, there was another deadline that towns had to meet that we met.
Yep.
Not all towns did because they didn't even realize it.
Correct.
Have you heard through the grapevine of any repercussions from those towns that didn't do anything?
Yes, so if you aren't in interim compliance nor do you comply by the full deadlines, you lose access to potential designations in grant funding like MassWorks and Housing Choice, but there's also, and I wanna get this term right, but it's the capital improvements, that's really a state budget and it's not a grant nor designation, but it's a state budget that they discuss and approve, and that can at times impact local housing authorities because a lot of their budgets can come from that.
Yeah.
And so other communities have seen their housing authorities' budgets potentially impacted because of their failure to remain in interim compliance. So it is something we want to comply with and maintain.
You do have to be kind of specific. I'm looking at the form here. Where eliminating zoning strategies, you can select all that apply. I would recommend all of them, but then you say, for each one that you select, you have to identify and briefly describe the possibly compliant district, including any characteristics of existing development and transit. So you have to get a little bit specific, I think.
So, with that being said, right, when do we meet in January? Here's a couple, when do we meet in January? When were you thinking of trying to get CPDC and the select board and ZBA together before the January 31st deadline, after the January 31st deadline, and I'm gonna throw the other question in there of like, I guess all of that's filtered through the when do we get some data back, right? So
So my hope is to get the data by next week so that I can digest it and start preparing to present it to you on your January 9th meeting. That's the intent. Hopefully it all works out that way.
Do you have any signals that you'll get it next week? Or is
I
this just-
got an update today that they asked when my January meeting is, because I told them I wanted to present to you in December on it, and so that was last time. This is this time. So they've mentioned it should be coming in the week or two.
So if I could make maybe a request for a next step, and then we can figure out like the timing. So step number 1 is definitely what the hell is our baseline, and then you were mentioning like a kind of a do nothing, a minimal do something scenario, and like a transformative scenario. Maybe there's like a medium scenario. So I think it would be instructive, and whether it's part of the housing production plan or whether we could potentially see this in January, to like consider what all 3 of those could entail.
Okay.
That's my idea for understanding like what does change mean here.
Assuming that's not too much work
How much
for you.
work is that?
That's why I threw in like maybe it could be, we could have it as part of what the HPP is considering right now.
well, if I can rephrase what I think that you're saying, right, is that right, I just based on your comments, right, you have a whole bunch of different ideas floating around in your head, right, of like, oh, maybe we could do this, maybe we could do that. Some of them are like I don't know if that will fly or whether we even want to do that. Getting that right, getting all that down in right, the problem is you don't know right now, right, you have all the ideas, but you don't know, is this idea going to produce a lot or not, right? I think just even having on paper, what are all your ideas that you have floating around there? And, like, I think those you could probably pretty easily fit those in, like, oh, this is a no-brainer, and this would take a little work, and this one's pretty, and so at least we get the flavor of what opportunities there are. I'm not so sure. I think where the work comes in is translating those into numbers, and I don't know if we need to.
I
I
will
don't know
try.
that
I
we
think
need
it's
to
worth
either.
that effort to see what a zone.
I think, right, like, but even just getting that flavor, I think would be helpful, especially once we get the numbers back from the technical assistants, because then we know whether we should need to do this or we need to do that. And is that, I mean, I didn't want to cut.
I think that's
is
what
that
I'm
really what you're-
suggesting, and I'm also just folding in a reaction to there's a status, what you said, where there's a status quo approach and then there's a transformative approach, just wanting to be mindful
So I didn't mean
that
to imply it is one or the other.
Right,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
that's
yeah.
like the other half.
Yeah.
But no, I agree with
Well,
what John
and
was
even
saying.
the way you might want to organize your ideas, to create less work for you down the line, where by January 31st, you've got to fill in this form. There's this section 3 of the form that is preliminary zoning strategies, right? Option A is there's a district you believe already complies. We don't think so, right? B,
40R.
Right, 40R.
So 40R might comply district
Oh, right,
size
yeah.
and
Right.
density wise, but in terms of 1,500 unit count, no.
Yeah, and so each of these, and this is where you get to select all that apply, and by January 31st, you have to kind of do a little bit more, kind of demonstrate that you've thought this through some. And so even if you organize your ideas by those different categories, right? A new 40R or overlay zoning district, I don't think that's what we're talking about. But if you were to organize your ideas, that might help us also think about giving you productive feedback to help you ultimately fill out this form.
Yep.
Great idea.
But they do ask things specifically, like, what's document showing how you think this is gonna work.
It's nice to ask, right?
It's nice to
Like,
ask.
right, you gotta,
Attach this
you need to
document.
follow it up with some basic, right, like,
Actually, that stuff is optional.
Don't we have a GIS database administrator who could
We
give
do.
you the numbers?
Yep. So I know I included a bunch of data spreadsheets in your drive, and I haven't had the time to actually digest them. So we've collected a lot of the data on a lot of these zoning districts. Now it's really kind of what can we do with that data in terms of like using it to help determine a unit capacity, and if we were to reduce lot size, say in 840 from the substantial number it is to a small, would that actually
Yeah.
do anything or open more lots or et cetera? So those are the concepts that I have to flush out and put in.
Okay. It just strikes me as just
Crazy.
weird.
Right.
To
We'd
have
have to
something
take
that
all of the
Jasmine
parking
is
lots
so
that we have for
important and so
McDonald's and the Jiffy Lube and other places, build a building there.
Maybe
There's not
maybe
much
it's
more buildable
Yeah.
land in this town
Yeah.
that's incomplete parcels.
Mhm.
That's not a half acre here or quarter acre there. You can say, okay, we'll build on that.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
we were
there.
very aggressive in getting the 40Rs and 40Bs built.
Number one, we don't have to build the 1,500 units. Everybody keeps that in mind.
Yeah.
We just have to set it up so that they would be permitted, so that if somebody came in under this bylaw and said, I wanna put up 4 units, 8 units, that they would be able to without having to come before the board and present
No waivers, no waivers.
no waivers. Okay, so as you said, Jiffy Lube, Burger King, if they wanted to tear it down and put up a new building, they could.
Yep.
However, they're not going to, so don't worry about it. My original thought
My
process.
thinking is we ought to build over the railroad tracks.
Oh my
That
god, I
will
just
be
had
a
that
com-
thought tonight.
There's some other places that have done it.
Yeah.
Right.
My
there-
thought process is very simple. You've got the S15 district, which is traditionally or historically
Single family.
been multiple families. If you go back to the founding of Reading, the mills, you've got a ton of 3 families down there, multiple families, etc. If you allowed for multiple families in the S15 district, just like we had the 4 unit at the last meeting on 9,000 square feet, which is more than our 15 units. If you just did that within a certain radius around the train station, you'd meet your requirements.
I think that would be very difficult to get through town meeting, because I know the S15 district may have been like that a long time ago, but that's not how it is.
But right now, that S15 district, there's no 15s. Everything is 8, 7, 5.
Yeah.
I'm in a 15.
It's very,
Mine is 15.
it's somewhat dense today. It's the best place to put the density because it is close to downtown. It is close to industry. It is close to the train. And you're not gonna get these huge 55 unit complexes. You're gonna get your neighbor who's had a house for 100 years that probably needs to be rebuilt. And he's gonna be able to put up a 2-family or a 3-family.
And it's gonna look the same massing as a single family.
Exactly.
That's
You might not even be able to tell.
That's right.
It'll look real. I think there is a story to be told there.
Yes, I mean, it's a very transformative idea to people's current concepts of thinking, where S15 and suburban area has been dominant over history, recent history. So, but Reading set itself up to success, to your guys' credit, with your dense 40R and now maybe moderate density surrounding it, and then S15.
And if you want a
Looking
vibrant
at-
downtown, you need the people nearby who can get to it. God knows we're not gonna create any more parking downtown. So you're gonna need people who are gonna be able to walk. That means you're gonna need people with a slightly more dense, more people close by is gonna give you a more vibrant downtown.
So, it's a lot of hoopla to say still, we don't quite know where
Right,
we're
so
going, what we're
we
doing.
want to focus on this at the January 9th
I do.
meeting, and to the question of, do you wanna get everybody together, all those boards together before January 31st or after January 31st?
I can imagine that we're able to
That
make
would be like
work,
the zoning
yeah.
workshop is getting everybody together kind of thing.
Yeah, so I mean, that's just the strategy I'm trying to personally put together for the year. Like, we have kind of leadership goals and strategies and then public engagement around those concepts, or is it public engagement to decide the goals and strategies? So we've gone, it's a nice little segue, I guess, to the housing production plan. We've been undergoing that process for the last few months. We have a small working group with liaisons Katrina and Jackie McCarthy from the Select Board, as well as Reading Housing Authority and a few others in town related to affordable housing and housing development in general. We had a community survey with over 800 responses. We held 2 public forums, both of which admittedly lacked a bit of public participation. Those that were there had great conversations and deep, detailed conversations, but I would have liked to personally generated more numbers there and outreach to make sure we have involvement that we're looking for. So the next steps for the housing production plan is where we've established kind of the goals and strategies, both from the last plan through other planning processes that we've undergone, like the 40R zoning amendments and others, and as well as the public comment through the survey and those forums. So the goals and strategies have kind of been established right now, but the next step is to put them into the plan language and then present an update to both the select board and to you as CPDC. I'm actually planning that update to you on your January 9th agenda to discuss housing goals and strategies in relation to not just affordable unit creation, but just strategies in general for housing development. So some are a bit more specific, some are not, some we could do some priority setting going into the future, but we've been working with Answer Advisory on that. So really my update was just to say, expect a bigger presentation and update from the census data findings, the survey findings, and the engagement so far at your next meeting.
When's it due by?
It is due February 13th, 2023 to DHCD, so it's been a quick moving process through the plan, but Answer's been great. The working group has been great, so we will put out the word that we're coming to select board January 10th. You guys January 9th, the day prior, and if they take another hearing with the select board and potentially you as well, so be it, and we'll do that. But we're getting those dates out there right now to hopefully get lasting public comment and more input on the plan itself. So that's where that's at, and once we it goes into effect the date we submit it to DHCD, so that's why that February 13th date is important, because that's when the existing plan expires. So we want to be ahead of that, because as soon as we submit, we're technically in safe harbor and the plan is active, and DHCD may get us some minor comments back likely, but the plan itself will still be active. So that's that plan update.
And then you also had hazard mitigation planning update.
Yes, so that's another grant funded project that Reading is underway. Will go throughout 2023. We're working with a consultant, state appointed a consultant for us to work with. So we're looking to establish an internal working group with both local partners and regional. Cpdc is generally involved in it through project updates and or a sitting member. We're looking to hit kickoff on December 20th, next week. So that's our project kickoff meeting with the working group. And then we're looking for internal working group meetings once every 2 months from there through June. So it's 2 or 3 meetings. If you happen to be available during a daytime use and would like to attend, you're more than welcome to. If not, I can continuously provide the project updates and reach out with specific questions. I know many of you have been involved on many ongoing planning updates, so it's a lot to ask, but this is a required plan through the state every 5 years. So similar to housing production, our existing plan is set to expire and we need to update this for FEMA compliance and potential grants and mitigation and so on. So it's a well worth effort, and we'll undergo that next week. So not much of an update, just wanted to let you know that it's kicking off. And as we talk about plans, I would be remiss if I didn't mention we are also looking to discuss a net zero plan in 2023 for municipal net zero strategies and looking to achieve state and local goals to reduce emissions and potentially develop renewable sources of energy. So many towns are currently undergoing that plan process. We're just slightly behind them, but we're awarded a community compact grant for that. We're submitting for MAPC TAP assistance to help fund it as well. And we'll look to work with the Climate Advisory Committee, you guys and others throughout the process for strategies to help us achieve a net zero by a set date to reach regional needs. So that's an exciting project, one I'm excited for as well. So just to keep on your radar. I'm trying to think what my last update, if any, was on the agenda.
As easy as the
I guess I can share an update that just happened today, but the Simon's Way is called Exploratory
Committee,
That
yep.
just kicked off today at 6. There's nothing that's happened yet. We got a 322 page document. We voted in a chair and a vice chair, and we're meeting again on a Wednesday in January, I think like the 3rd Wednesday or something like that. So it's moving. All right. Anything else? Should we look at the other minutes? Any other updates or things to share?
If you are interested, our MVP grant award project, the Millette Soms Morgan Constructed Wetland Project, is a $2 million grant award through MVP just over. That construction is expected to ensue early in 2023 by spring. We have a public engagement forum on Tuesday, January 20th. So we'll be advertised. We actually have already advertised that. We had a public site walk on last Saturday. We actually had a number of public participants in that, and it was a great discussion, and we walked through the site to explain where some of the improvements will be, a number of the wetland cells, the path improvements, and so on. So we heard a lot of good feedback there on potential screening improvements, amenity improvements, and plantings. So we'll address those in our January forum, but that is going to go underway shortly. That's another quick moving project under MVP grant deadlines, and we have set ourselves up for a tight schedule, but we are hoping to hit it and not need any contract amendments. But number of factors in play, such as the MBTA, which is impossible to get in touch with and hear back from. So we're working on that, and that's that. So
What do you need from the MBTA? I'm just curious.
so we need a license application because the right of way off of Willow abuts their land, and
Yeah.
we're likely gonna need to remove some trees along the property line or even potentially within their property to get access for all the needs of construction. So it's not a lot, and there's also sewer lining underneath their right of way that we need to conduct an inspection on that. So there's a few small items. It's really not super impactful to the MBTA and their right of way. They were supposed to put a fence up along the property line. They put it up by the rail bed like 15 feet off, did not survey. So there's just been a few things that we're working through to understand what it is they need from us to help move it along a bit quicker, because it can take 3 to 6 months for their license application reviews and approval, and we're really hopeful that that's not the case here. So
I'm really
TBD.
excited about that project.
Yes, it's a super exciting project. That's a big win for the town and a great project to be involved with personally. So I think that's all my planning
Questions or anything?
updates. So there's many more, but thank you, Karen.
Okay, let's do those September 12th minutes.
I'm gonna go down to page 6.
Mm-hmm.
I was reviewing these while you guys were the others. So the second full paragraph, this starts with Ms. Adrian. I think, let's see, the end of that first line, I think it should say, she asked if there is room for, no, I'm sorry, that wasn't the right one.
Mr. Olinger replied it is likely, should be Mr. Olinger replied it is unlikely. Is that what you're trying to point out?
Yes,
That's
thank
what
you.
I was just-
Yes, I had not likely, yes.
Thank you.
And then the next two sentences later, Ms. Adrian clarified her question is if the access from the garage building to the truck is accessible. Not commutable.
Thank you.
Or achievable, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's a
Achievable,
better word.
achievable.
If you want to go down 2 more paragraphs, at the end in the middle, you see section 9.0. I believe that should be 10.5. 9.0 is our standard parking requirements. She confirmed that it met the parking requirements under section 10.5.
Thank you.
Page 8. Paragraph 3. Mr. Schomer stated that the Reading Police Department letter was submitted from the original project design and with the density reduction. Such comments have not been reiterated. I'm not certain what density reduction Mr. Schumer was referring to. I thought the project started at 12 units and remained at 12 units throughout the entire life cycle.
Wait, where are you, page 8?
Page 8, third paragraph.
So yes, they actually originally came to staff with 20 units.
Okay,
Once we reiterated concerns, brought it to 12 through the public hearing process.
all right, we never saw a 20 unit plan.
Correct.
Okay, that's where my confusion was.
But I guess I'm not sure that that's the case then.
Right.
I don't know how to incorporate that, right? Because if it wasn't submitted, the police department wouldn't have been submitting on commenting on a plan that was not submitted. That's not the process.
I thought that was the process of the design review team. The DRT meets
Before it came to
before it comes to
CPDC.
CPDC.
Right, and the police department may have, but we wouldn't have gotten a letter stating that.
Correct. So, okay.
And we did. So I think,
Did
right,
get a
there's, so I think there's he made this statement, but we're not sure that it's true.
And well, yes.
Right, so the minutes do in fact reflect what he said, but if what he said was actually accurate is a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's deep in the record.
Yes. Just trying to be precise on this.
No,
that's
it's good,
absolutely right.
it's
Yeah,
good, and there
yes,
were
yeah.
a few things like that where it's like just saying things doesn't make them true.
Some people believe that, some people don't.
Some people say the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. Some disagree. Page 9, 1, 2, 3, fourth paragraph. Third line in, I think it says note to vote instead of not vote.
Yeah.
Fourth line.
Got it.
Yeah, we already gave you that. I think your counts are all off on the votes.
Also,
Oh, wait, no, never
We
mind.
have 5 members present and 4 voting members.
Well, I was confusing it. I thought the one was the abstaining. I can't do math in my head after 9 o'clock.
After 10 o'clock now.
I'm done when you guys are.
Yep.
Anybody still reading?
I am.
Okay, take your time.
I'm done. Andrew, the one thing I know was sent multiple times and I don't see it in the record is any of the letters from the Johnsons at 166 Washington. Did those be attached to the notes?
They are included in the record and were
Okay.
sent to all, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, on the documents reviewed at the meeting, I typically stick to what was shown on the screen and not the
Okay.
full packet.
Okay.
we supposed to go back to wearing masks at meetings? What's the view of the town?
Is out of my role to know, so I'm sure if so, we will be informed promptly, but
Is this, I didn't even realize that something is being considered, I'm not paying attention, I guess, lately.
same if I'm honest with you.
What's that?
So, same if I'm honest with you, so.
It's creeping up and that's why I
Well,
was
yes.
concerned.
I'm just under the impression
It's a
it's been
triple threat
optional for
now.
all now, what's that?
Sorry, it's a triple threat now.
I know.
Okay, guys, I'd like to make a motion to approve the CPDC meeting minutes from September 12th, 2022,
Second.
as amended.
Thank you.
All in favor? Okay, that passes unanimously. And we'll do the next sets at our next meeting.
Yes, I
They're not
didn't
even
get them in the,
right?
yes.
I think that's it, so I think we'll take a motion to adjourn.
One last thing
Oh, yes.
before. Andrew, you said that you have all the data somewhere on the shared drive. I did not see it shared in the list of items I can get to from Google. Could you put that somewhere that we can get to
The spreadsheets?
in spreadsheets? And perhaps include my spreadsheets.
Is that there were 3 Excel sheets in our Google Drive, is that them?
That was them.
Yep.
And I'm going through them now to like update some of the comments that are out of date. Digest the data a bit, but yeah, I had thought they were in there, but if not, I'll resend
They
them.
could be in there if you're seeing them.
Under
They're under that, they're under the
MBTA communities,
folder for MBTA communities.
under this meeting. Today's meeting.
Okay.
And I have your email, Tony, to go through as well and thoughts, so that was sent way back you sent that, but I got it and I will go through it.
Works out to 2,000 units. 1,993 with a density of 17.54.
That was for the entire S15 zone? Wait,
That's taking basically a half mile from the train station. Using the 40R district, the A40 district, and allowing for multifamily housing
As an overlay?
as an overlay.
I feel like that's what DHCD expected everyone to do.
They did not expect the outrage from all the communities around.
I think they expected
they
it.
did.
I think they expected it, and
Yeah.
that's why they tied all the grant money to it.
Yeah.
All right, anything else?
Not this meeting.
Basically that, yeah.
What's that?
The map,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, so using,
I got the GIS data from Andrew and, I don't even remember her name, Julie. I'm bad with names. And I put that into my own database, did the analysis against it, probably the same tool that they used. Said, okay, so if I allow minimum of 3 units, I also took the frontage and added that square footage at half of 42 feet, 45 feet for 22.5 feet, so that I correctly got the correct entire zone density, because you can't do it by unit, it has to be for the entire zone, has to meet the minimum of 15. Ran that through and came out with 2,000 units. It affects 315 properties.
So that could be one of the scenarios.
I'll include it in the list.
All right, anything else?
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Well done,
Even
Andrew.
12 o'clock.
I know.
Or 11.